Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's interview, I'm sitting down with David Hammer. We had a great conversation on the phone the other day. I invited him onto the channel where he could share his infinite banking story, and I hope that you enjoy. All right, David, man, thanks so much for saying yes to what I think is pretty not typical, but you were real outgoing, real generous in that way to saying yes when we had a phone conversation the other day, to having a second follow-up conversation, and to even being able to record it and open to sharing your infinite banking journey. So I did have a great time talking with you on the phone the other day. But why don't you just say, who you are, where you're from, anything I'll let you say, paint that picture. I want to get to where infinite banking found you, or you found infinite banking. But tell me, how are you this morning? And then I'll just let you jump into your origin story as you'd like to.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. And thank you for inviting me. Um, as you mentioned, um, my origin story. I'm from New York area. I actually am in New Jersey right now. And my origin story, not coincidentally, being very close to Wall Street, was my initial foray in my professional career once I graduated college. This is back in the day when movies like the movie Wall Street, and there was a lot of fascination with Wall Street, and I had grown up with a lot of professionals that a lot of my father's and my parents' friends were working on Wall Street, so that was always even a vision for me when I was in elementary school. I mean, I remember distinctly about a particular teacher who had a lesson. Um, and I'll just tell you real quickly, Jesse, is that um, it was a very simple lesson plan for the year, which is they asked every student in the class, and her name was Mrs. Greenberg. I remember the teacher. And she asked all of the students to take one company, go into the newspapers, go to your father's, the financial section, pick out a company, and I want you to journal the the price of this company for 6 months. Basically, to have us start to understand that there are instruments of finance, even way back then, that a simple task like this. So I remember vividly, this was the company I picked was Getty Oil, which is no longer, I believe, even a company, you know. And so that was my first introduction and interest into the fascination of what money's about, how people invest. So college, studied economics, and out of college, immediately went into a part of Wall Street where I was a trader. I traded stocks. Um, what I found out very shortly into trading was that um, there were people on the my friends that were on the other side of the business. So I consider myself to be on the what I call the buy side of Wall Street, which is buying stocks as opposed to being the salesperson. And I found that a lot of my friends that were on the what I call the sell side were making a pretty decent living, even actually more lucrative than what I was doing at the time. So fast forward, I went into the what I considered besides Merrill Lynch the creme de la creme in training, which was a company called Shearson Lehman. And that company, as if you guys understand, like if you understand Wall Street, is that companies that were in existence 20, 30, 40 years ago, no longer in existence. But what I got from that training platform was the idea that we as financial professionals have a big responsibility to educate. So um, I went through, I think, 6 different firms in a period of 20 years. And so what got me to, and also Jesse, to let you know, is that when it came to life insurance, what Wall Street trained me and taught me was that stay in my lane. Just concentrate on asset management, build the assets, help people invest. But in hindsight, as what I wish I knew then, what I know now is that I was definitely shortchanging what what clients were expecting from me, because this was not what I consider to be a holistic approach to helping them to reach their financial goals and such. So, and they always taught us, let someone else, like, maybe find a life insurance professional that you could maybe recommend to them, but don't bother yourself, so to speak, with it, right? So fast forward, I ended up actually working for, after actually having my own brokerage firm for a couple of years. I actually had my own firm. Is I had an opportunity to be able to be a strategist at a company called MetLife. But I came in an investment capacity. And what I found out right away is that, as much as my expertise in where I came from, Wall Street, what was equally important was an understanding of how life insurance and guarantees and different products that are based upon life insurance, how important they are. And that's what started my evolution in my business, to couple my experience that I gained from Wall Street and marry it with a lot of other concepts that were just not being emphasized in my industry. So I ended up working at MetLife, which, Jesse, I don't know if you're aware, MetLife then was bought out by Mass Mutual. And that's where I became much more ingrained in understanding protection, because protection, again, was something that was foreign in Wall Street. It was really more about just growth, 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 growth. At Mass Mutual, COVID hits early 2021, right, Jesse?
Hmm.
And like a lot of professionals, maybe I'm speaking to people in your channel, is there was a lot of fear about what was going to happen in our industry. Were we going to be able to actually interact with our clients and also the public, because of a lot of the social distancing and a lot of the, staying at home. So I went down a rabbit hole of looking and being on my computer a lot to try to figure out new answers to how to approach our business and how to keep the business alive. And in doing so, I stumbled upon a particular gentleman's video that just intrigued me, because it was approaching um, and storytelling that I found was compelling. Now, little did I know that this gentleman, again, who was local, is maybe about half an hour from me in New Jersey, that he was actually a career life insurance agent. And what then I, what I, but I was at a point, Jesse, that I was really concerned about, like what shape was our industry going to be taking, during COVID, and how long we were going to be sheltered in place and such. So as I want one strong personality trait that I have, and that I've done, and then I've incorporated, that I learned from Wall Street, is this idea of persistence. So I reached out to this gentleman, didn't hear back from him. I then kept following up, following up, following up, because what I've always been taught, and I've seen it in my own practice, and Jesse, I'm sure maybe for you as well, and your audience, is that the gold is in the follow-up. I've seen studies where, I've heard people like Grant Cardone and other very successful entrepreneurs talk about that sometimes it takes, and this is going to sound great, like 15 to 20 touches before you actually get to the heart of the matter, who you are, who's on the other end of the conversation. Whether it be like they're very busy professionals. So I did the same thing with this particular person who had this video. I'm going roundabout in my response. I hope that's okay. But
No, I'm loving it. Keep going. Take your time.
so then um, I asked to like go visit his office and see what they're up to. So I took a drive down to about a half an hour down the Garden State Parkway here in the lovely state of New Jersey. And my eyes were open to something that I just wasn't even aware of, which is how you can use life insurance as a way to be able to redirect how your money is flowing in a way that puts the equation back in your favor. So this particular organization was had created what they call an ecosystem merger with a social influencer who was selling real estate programs, had been doing it for 5 or 6 years, and he on at his live events and all of his videos talked about foundationally that you need to first, before you get into real estate, you need to open up one of these bank accounts using cash value life insurance. And that's how I, as a professional, for the first time, had never even heard of the concept. And you're talking about someone who had been doing this for 30 years already. So I started going down the rabbit hole, and I ended up becoming a strategist at his group. And um, I was very lucky to be able to be part of an organization that had many, many people that were eager to hear about what infinite banking is, what it can do for them, how it can apply for them, how it apply to them as they're investing and dipping their toe in the water in real estate. And it was also helpful that you had someone who of influence who was already like telling these good folks that about all the attributes of what it can do for people, particularly in real estate. So that's how I initially became interested and started practicing IBC.
So I hope that it's been fine. Anytime I'm looking down, I am a note taker. So I've been writing things down, and I have questions. I actually like to go back to your Mrs. Greenberg teacher, because that's terribly interesting. I don't think I had those kinds of teachers. I had beautiful teachers. I had great experience actually in public school. My wife and I homeschool our children. And I've been a public teacher myself in North Carolina for some years. But I feel like it had to have been your just natural bent towards money and finance and Wall Street, like you described it, that made you even pay attention to that. So one, I think that it's exceptional and terribly interesting that a teacher came up with the idea of, hey, I think you should go find some company and follow it for 6 months, see what you learn, see what you come up with, see what you find out. I think that's terribly interesting. But I also recognize that it was received well by you, which I find fascinating as well to me. So, because I feel like I probably in that same classroom, I feel like I would have been more interested in going outside and climbing a tree. So it would have been wasted on me, which is kind of a pity, I want to say. But I find it terribly fascinating that you took it and then maybe kind of ran with it. But you also had family influences, you said, family friends that worked at Wall Street. So one question I had was when it came to college. When you went to school, you studied economics. So I've been turned on to economics, David, because of infinite banking. So like because of reading Nelson's Becoming Your Own Banker book and then seeing, oh, he's got a lot of suggested reading at the back. I got turned on to the concept of particularly Austrian economics. But I'd like to know more about, what do you remember from economics at that point in life? What stuck out to you? What's been useful to you? What did you disagree with? What have you heard then that maybe you've heard differently now? Economics. What's your perspective on it now?
So going back to like elementary school for just for a minute, if I may, is
Sure.
that what actually I remember vividly as well was that we had a set of Encyclopedia Britannica that was back, and now I'm dating myself. I remember pouring through those encyclopedias to understand like oil companies and like Getty Oil and what was the origin of Getty Oil. Like John Paul Getty, I believe, um, was the owner of that company. Like, so I remember even back then just being kind of fascinated with like, my father pulls up to to a gas station and it's a business. And you met like, in fourth grade, I don't know how old I am, 10 years old. And like I was even just interested back then about just what makes business tick and wanting to know like it's like I felt like I owned Getty Oil in fourth grade. Let's put it that way. Like I thought like I didn't have a share of it, but I thought I really had a vested interest in like what happened to Getty Oil because I assigned this company to myself. So it was almost competitive. Like I wanted to make sure that this company did well under my watch, if that makes sense.
It does. You were mentally vested. You were educationally invested, not monetarily because you were a child and didn't buy a stock or whatever, like you said. But that's neat.
And so did I like when I went to college, um, it was natural for me to want to study something that was financial related. Now, I went to a very competitive school and I could have gone to the business school, but I wanted to actually get a liberal arts education while I was studying finance. So I could, so when you asked me about um, what I learned in economics in college, I took more of an approach of the psychology of business when I studied economics. Because I also had a second major in industrial psychology. Because I always wanted to know, the psychological aspects of business, which of course held me in good stead in my career because you and I and anyone that's watching this that's in call it sales or relationships with the public is that you have to meet people where they are. And that means understanding all of their verbal and nonverbal cues of what they know and don't know and how much and what you need to teach them. So my economics interest was more it wasn't technical as much as it was more, the whole like, supply and demand and I learned all of the classic, economic systems you know, that Nelson Nash in the book, talks about there's different ways, there's Keynesian and other ways, and that's also helped me in being an infinite banking practitioner and understanding there's all different philosophies of economics. And I never realized till I started reading the book, maybe a third or fourth time, how much Nelson's teachings are steeped in his, in his um, love of Austrian economics and what it represents. Um, so even actually, Jesse, I don't know if like last week, the Mises Institute actually sent me a book on I think it's Frederick Hayek. And now I'm like pouring into that book and like I want to go down the rabbit hole with all of that because that's the basis for, you know, what we do as infinite banking practitioners is letting the public and people know that there are different ways that their money can flow into and for them to be able to use in their lives. And it's all based on a lot of it on classical economic thinking, and not just here in the United States, but overseas.
I love it. Do you happen to recall which book from Hayek's it was?
I mean, it's in the other room.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'm always reading out, and I'm always adding to my list, and he's a familiar name to me. And I, like I said, I've dove in on Nelson's suggested readings and whatnot as well. So you were more interested in the people side, the psychology side of business, and nothing wrong, obviously, and you picked it up along the way. The classical teaching points, like you said, supply and demand, Chicago school, Keynesian school, Austrian school, etc. Very cool. Um, you started trading stocks right out of college. Is that when you? Okay.
I worked for what they would probably they consider today a hedge fund.
Mm-hmm.
It was a small private investor who had inherited a decent amount of money, and he had a trading arm. So I was an assistant trader right out of the gate, right out of college. So I got to learn, this is before computers took over uh, the way things are done on Wall Street. So this was still like in the days where you make a phone call and you call down to a physical person that's on the floor on the exchange, getting a what they call a floor picture of, like, if it was, let's say, Getty Oil that I talked about from fourth grade. I would call the trader at the post on the floor, and I would find out who's on the what they call the buy side of that stock, who's on the sell side. So if it's heavy one way versus another, it gives you a sense of what direction that stock is going to go short term. Because a lot of times we were trading in and out of these stocks, sometimes intraday. But again, not using computers, this was more like human to human.
Now, did you just happen to apply for a job
So
in
I
any?
mean, if in all transparency, I had an uncle who was the controller and got me at least the interview and the leg in all
Awesome.
transparency. But then it was up to me, and then I ran with it. Um, right, it was 4 years.
Very neat. Very neat. Well, I mean, I'm just digging there out of curiosity. And I think that things happen for a reason. Again, for me, of course, you could say on this side of things, looking back, maybe you could see where dots connected. Elementary teacher did this, family friends, and family and finance there. In college, I was interested. Oh, psychology, I want to know about that. Economics, I want to know about that. Um, I feel like I see some dots connecting anyway, and I just think it's terribly interesting. And I have the belief that we all have our innate gifts. You obviously, though, have developed those gifts and sought out experiences to enhance those gifts and those inclinations that you have. So I see dots connecting in my mind.
So Jesse, just to connect the dots even more, you will find it very intriguing to know that both of my grandfathers were in the life insurance business.
What? Okay. Very
My
cool.
grandfather had his own agency back in the 40s and 50s and 60s in New York. And my other grandfather was what they called a debit. They called it a debit. I forget the actual name, where he actually would go door to door to collect premiums. This is like back in the 30s and the 40s. So it's actually in my lineage that I just didn't even realize that would end up becoming, full circle for me at some point.
Right. So do people with the last name of Hammer just have to do something in finance then, I guess?
Oh, it was even like, yeah, I guess my grandfather on my father's side had my last name, but even my other grandfather, yeah, I guess maybe it was in the DNA that I had pushed to the side for a while, I guess.
That's in well, so here's one thing that comes to my mind in thinking about that, David, is your grandfathers were in life insurance in, I don't know if you'd call it life insurance heyday. I feel like we're now in life insurance's heyday because the companies are that much older and it's that much more well known. But also, there's been, I feel like maybe a dip in life insurance is commonly owned, commonly talked about. I mean, I remember MetLife commercials and stuff on TV growing up. I remember that. I remember. So, but then there was maybe a dip around the 80s because of Congress and things that happened historically around. And so it just maybe lost popularity because of the 401ks and et cetera, the conventional route of finance and investing. And then now I see, of course, a big resurgence of the virtues of acknowledging the virtues of particularly whole life insurance because of infinite banking, because of R. Nelson Nash and becoming your own banker and the Nelson Nash Institute. So it seems like there's been this dip. So I do find that terribly interesting. Both of your grandfathers in the life insurance. So that made me want to ask another one of my questions that I wrote down when you were telling your history was, okay, you start buying stocks, you're on the buying side of things. I feel like I understand what you're saying there. You go through several different firms. No doubt you picked up a lot along that route. I mean, business just it's a moving life. Anything in business, maybe particularly finance. You were always told, though, you said that from Wall Street in general, the take is, well, insurance is out there. Yes, point somebody towards a referral if you've got one, but that's not what we do. That's somebody else. That's the other guy. You've said it to me before on the phone when that's the other guy. That's not us. Um, but then you also still said, though, at some point that you started your own brokerage. So I'm curious, what's going through your mind when you start a brokerage?
Well, that was my um, having been on what I would call Wall Street, or like doing the traditional route of being a retail financial advisor, is that I realized after many, many years is that those places are good to work at up to a certain level. And then you reach a level where, um, for me at least professionally, there was a ceiling where I knew there was more. So I wanted to go out on my own to create my own firm, with all of the experiences that I had gathered over the course of time. Because at some point, it's really just, we're all in our own business here as professionals. Like I own my book of business. This is my business. It's like someone owning a steel company or apparel company or whatever people are in business. They own their business. Jesse, you own your business. I own my business. So the thinking was I was thinking that I like Wall Street had served its purpose for me, had given me a lot of skills, but there was more out there and I wanted to explore it on my own. So that's when the independence thinking started to kick in, because the one thing that I've also known and figured out about myself is that I don't fit into a lot of like conventional boxes. And I think that was my first inkling that I wanted to explore what else is out there, including starting my own firm. In all transparency, I ended up going to into business with somebody, and it was a learning lesson for me, who was a friend of mine, who I thought I kind of knew, but when it comes to when you end up going into business with people that the dynamics of that relationship change dramatically right away. Um, so that was kind of a short-lived owning my own firm, because mostly just because of the strained relationship, so to speak, that I had with my business partner. But to answer your question, I saw a path that was being laid out for me where I was going in a different direction from the conventional Wall Street thinking, which led me to where I am today and continues to have me evolve. Because becoming your own banker and being an infinite banking practitioner, it's all about bucking the conventional wisdom of what we've all been taught. So maybe in some way the universe led me this way because that's the way I was even tending 15 years ago. And here I am today. And exactly what we do for, in infinite banking is all about rethinking your thinking.
Hmm.
So maybe just subconsciously, or I was doing it 15 years ago, and then a series of events led me to where I am now, speaking to you about this.
Which is just terribly interesting. I do think that there are certain things in life that when we do those things with folks, we learn more. Travel, I feel like, could be one activity where if you travel with somebody, you get to know that person in a different way than you otherwise would doing your normal Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or whatever type context. And then, of course, going into business together is definitely another one of those. So there are life lessons along the way, no matter what. But yeah, travel, business, those are just some activities where, when you miss a flight and you're there with somebody and you've never traveled, you learn about each other, how you react, how you respond, things like that. So okay, well then 2020, 2021 was where you in your open-mindedness in looking ahead at the business landscape are thinking, things are changing in how we're doing business, which makes me have a feel for, well, would you say that you had done, let me just ask instead of assuming, would you say that you had done a lot of, what we would call belly to belly business, face to face business up to that point that made you look at, well, how do I continue forward best in this maybe more virtual dynamic?
Yeah,
Okay,
Okay,
cool.
cool.
because here I am being sheltered at home. I have, well, my older daughter had already graduated college, but like everything is online. I'm watching my daughter go through her college curriculum, everything online. So like she's literally because we were actually in a small apartment at that point. So we're literally sitting like 5 feet from each other at the kitchen, the island, like, and she's sitting over here, and I'm next to her, and she's on her little laptop doing her thing, and I'm starting to. This is maybe now the new normal, which is we're going to be, basically talking to people through a camera or learning through a camera on a computer, on a laptop. So yeah, I started to think this is going to be the new normal, and this new normal, I mean, back then, like it felt like it was gonna, this is the way it's gonna be.
Right, and a lot of things have stuck. I mean, you found somebody online by spending more time there who said some things, showed some things, told a story. You said he was a storyteller. So I am really curious about that. So when you started seeing what all you were seeing at the time, what did strike you? I mean, can you recall hearing something and thinking, because it maybe flew in the face of what you did know from your own personal experience, and you're like, that's not true, that's not right, or was it just you were curious, you were struck by something that was said and it was curiosity and it wasn't denial? So anything like that that you could recall?
I recall that very, very, very shortly under like being introduced to it, I'm the kind of person that wants to like research and dig and go down the rabbit hole. And I'm sure a lot of us had a lot of time on our hands during at least even the beginnings of like that whole sheltering in place. So the computer was like my best friend, and you know, so I started watching videos about infinite banking, about and then this is like when I realized it was a whole culture of financial professionals that were utilizing this particular strategy or starting to talk about it, and that's when that my interest just as I kept consuming information and understanding it, and then also almost being thrown into the fire of this community that I was being introduced to through the social influencer, where there was an appetite for people to want to understand it and how to use it. So it was almost like what I would call baptism by fire, where I would just be on the phone or on a Zoom, and I would have to learn. I don't want to say on the fly, but like I'm the kind of person that I never want to speak about a subject or introduce to someone, especially when it comes to the money, if I don't have full on knowledge of almost everything about it, which is kind of like I'm still learning things even, you know, 7 to 10 years later on this journey with infinite banking. So I had to learn rapidly exactly what this concept was about, how this particular group of investors or people that were hungry for knowledge, they wanted to better themselves, and real estate was like the next thing that they wanted to better themselves with. And infinite banking was introduced to them through somebody who had some influence to speak to them about it. And then they would come to me and they would already have it in their nervous system that this is something they need to know about. And then it was my job to educate and be a good steward of the concepts. And that's what I ended up doing. And there were times, Jesse, over that 5 year period where, and this is goes back to my Wall Street days, by the way, where, I was always taught I can't control the incoming, I can only control the outcoming. And if you understand what I mean, is that my output for myself was always determined by how much input I put into it. Meaning, I could always make the outgoing reaches to people. I'm never going to be sitting waiting for somebody to call me because then, you know, I'm gonna die a broke person with, mothballs in my pocket if I do that. So I was taught very, very early on Wall Street. This was back in the day when, I don't know if you know this concept called cold call cowboy, which is one of the systems that I was taught in. And I'm diverted, I'm like weaving my past into your present question.
I love it.
Before computers, now I'm aging myself. I literally opened up the white pages back in when I was in the training program on Wall Street. There was nothing like complex about it. It was basically just being able to have a conversation with someone where you have a value proposition that hopefully you articulate in a way where they want to know more about it. And then I think about it, Jesse, honestly, like these people that didn't know me from a hole in the wall, because they liked what they heard from me, I would have a conversation with them, sometimes on the first conversation, and they would mail me or my firm a check based upon a conversation. So that's when I knew that at least I had a skill set that still um, serves me very well, even 35 years later, being in this business where I have, like, I don't know from call reluctance. Like, there's no one I won't call about something that I think that they need to hear about. But why I'm fast forwarding to what you were asking me about before is that I was lucky enough when I got introduced to IBC is that I had a lot of people to speak to about it in a very quick amount of time, and my education around it, I had to know about it very, very quickly in the beginning. And then even then, I look at myself from 5 years ago till now, or 6 years ago till now, there's so much I didn't even know back then that I just, I'm always constantly elevating, training, educating, um, to this day that there's still things I think I'm just scratching the surface of exactly what we do for people in helping them change the way that they store their money and how they flow their money and how it could be bringing all of the equations back into their favor that they may not even realize that it's not in their favor until we show them how it's not.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case that there are plenty of things that folks might not realize that are going on until we just point it out to them. And then, of course, they can pursue that from there. So, how long then, David, was it, would you say? And then, what were the steps? What else happened between point A and point B of when you are seeing infinite banking, however it's presented online, to getting or connecting to the Becoming Your Own Banker book, or hearing or finding out about this guy R. Nelson Nash and the institute that he created, and those types of things? What did that look like?
So, so when I was first introduced to infinite banking, it wasn't like the group of professionals that I was working with weren't even calling it infinite banking, because the influencer who was introducing the idea to his community of clients, he didn't call it infinite banking. He was really more talking about this is the way the Rockefellers used to do it.
Okay.
It was never a formal, you need to read Nelson Nash's book and you need to get Becoming Your Own Banker. That wasn't even introduced to me till like probably, I would say 4 years into practicing what became IBC.
So then, all right. So interesting. What differences then would you say, or what things have you picked up on? What, yeah, what was different between what you first were exposed to, what you thought about it, what you mentally had to work through to adopt it, what boxes you had to check off to say, okay, yeah, I've vetted this. This is a good thing. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to help other people do this. And then when you get to, the codified original concept and the originator of the concept, Nelson, can you paint me a before and after? What did you think? What did you have to rethink? What happened? What did those steps look like? I'm just trying to make it broad for you. Address it how you'd like.
So the before picture was more, how can somebody who wants to make an investment, what can they do before they make that investment to make that investment create stronger overall returns for them, where the money can be, we used to affectionately call it back in with the other organization, we would call cash value life insurance like a Swiss Army knife, where there's different levers that you can pull to be utilized in ways that however you want to use them, whether it be for legacy or whether it be for leveraging a property that you want to put a down payment on. And before you do that, there's mechanisms that IBC teaches us where this money can first be deposited somewhere in a purposely designed cash value life insurance policy where you get more than one bite out of the apple. And that dollar can now be utilized in multiple ways where your your dollar is going farther if it's run through a system and purposely. So, but it was admittedly, Jesse, was more transactional when I first got started with IBC because it was really just about how someone had, let's say, $100,000. How can I open up one of these kind of policies where I could just drop this $100,000 in, then borrow it right back out within 30 days. That was my first introduction to it because this community, they just wanted to get started with real estate because they wanted to better their financial world, and real estate was something that they were just learning about. And again, the person who was leading them towards going into real estate, he had utilized cash value life insurance for himself. And so these people were coming and I was speaking to them. It was more one dimensional when I first was introduced to it. I then slowly over time understood that there were so many other aspects of what IBC is and what it does and the underpinnings of it that I didn't realize till, later on when I started reading Nelson's book and when I started going to masterminds and when I started understanding that this is a system that's been in place for over 200 years and how, like, why wasn't this publicized more and emphasized more just in general? And that's what fascinated me, was knowing that some of the wealthiest families that graced this earth were using this strategy well before there even was a Federal Reserve System, where there was a real, like an actual banking um, industry, so to speak. And now, I learn like now, like I'm reading, The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, and I'm reading, and this is someone who studied economics, and I'm learning things even like now at age 60, like just opening up my mind to like what we were taught and what we were conditioned to believe about money that not good or bad, it's just it was one-sided. And this is
Mm-hmm.
what we do with our, I think I'm speaking for you, is that we're teaching people that there's not just this one way, um, and how to win back control, that they may or may not even realize they've abdicated to other people. And that's our job to let them understand that there are other ways.
Okay, neat. So I can appreciate everything that you described as far as whole life as an asset, predating the IRS. Again, your grandfathers, both of them were in the business of life insurance. So it is what it is. It's been around as long as it has, and you can be very strategic. You could do more than just, okay, buy a policy on yourself or on a child or on a grandchild and just have whole life insurance. You can actually be strategic about it, and families have been strategic, or companies, also banks also have been strategic about owning life insurance in a systematic way, in a grander way. And then, depending on how a policy is built, of course, it can have these Swiss Army knife, type features. Dollars that are paid as premium into policies can accomplish multiple things for us: legacy, perhaps, terminal illness, accommodations, cash value, of course, that we could leverage to go out and do real estate deals. So I think there's lots to talk about there. I'm trying to get your origin story, but there's definitely lots to talk through right there, and I have at length. I mean, I've got a whole series on my channel dedicated to the what I call the myths, the mysteries, and the misconceptions around whole life insurance and infinite banking. There's a lot there that I'd actually like to talk with you about, but we'll stick to your origin story for the most part. I'd like to be able to have you back for more conversations. Now's a good time for me to just go ahead and mention that. Love to have you show up at a round table. That's another series that I have on the channel. I think you'd be a great participant there, a great contributor there. I think we could have some interesting conversations because of your perspective. You look like you got a thought. Let me pause.
I do have I mean, I'm just thinking about my origin story and how, when it comes to life insurance, and it's still the case is that life insurance like is another asset in someone's portfolio and a non-correlated asset. So for me, coming from Wall Street, also life insurance also continues to be another cog, another arrow in someone's quiver of, they have all of their different varied assets that they've been, that they have their money invested in. They have stocks, they have bonds, 401(k), they have real estate, they have cryptocurrency, they have hard assets like gold or silver and such, and then life insurance. And like I was always taught on Wall Street, like I always used to make it akin to, let's say, the smoothest and most efficient engine is usually one that has not four cylinders or six cylinders, but one that has eight cylinders, like a Ferrari or a Maserati. I believe they all have eight cylinders, meaning you need to have eight different things simultaneously working, and that just makes the ride that much stronger and efficient. And I see life insurance is again another one of those assets that's part of that whole, the whole asset allocation model of like having non-correlated assets that don't work in conjunction with each other, because there's going to be times when one asset class is out of favor and the other one is not. And you don't want everything moving in the same direction as the other. So life insurance also has become an asset in the traditional asset allocation model theory of having, your money in various different baskets.
Yeah, and and for people that are listening, if this is a new theme, I can say confidently that I believe that whole life insurance is a superior place to save money. So if somebody just wanted to use whole life insurance creatively for savings, an emergency fund, a war chest, that's a great move. If somebody wanted to have whole life policies for a systematic place to accommodate capital that they could then leverage those assets to deploy, make a real estate investment, replace, gains by paying policy loans back. Could whole life insurance also be a bond alternative? So like each of those individual things that I'm just trying to make a short list of real quick, could they be that, because you think creatively about whole life insurance? Yes, absolutely. But I see a very clear, distinct difference too, though, between high cash value life insurance as just being this account before I go out and do real estate. I think that folks probably know more about the real estate investment that they're making than they do about whole life insurance and what all it can be, instead of just being a go-between or a touching point along the way, like opening escrow. Just another thing to do to go get to real estate investing, instead of really appreciating what all it can be when it's designed properly, when it's owned for the purpose of implementing the actual infinite banking concept. It's very, very different than just doing one or two or three of those things, in my opinion. I have a very lifestyle approach to implementing infinite banking. I said I was going to try and stick to your story, and here I am making these comments. So let me then ask you, and that's why I say we need to have you probably to a round table where we could field these discussions. I think it would be great conversation. It's very useful for people. When then, how then, what did it look like when you heard about Nelson Nash, the infinite banking concept, becoming your own banker, the book, anything there? How did that come about?
Um, so I'm trying to remember how I first found out about the Nelson Nash Institute. But I was I was pleasantly surprised to know that there was already a community of like-minded professionals that were already like disciples of Nelson Nash and had been so for, I think some of them have, like Bruce and obviously David Stearns, like they've been exposed to this for 15, 20 years at least. And so I don't remember exactly how I got introduced. I think it was part of like me just doing more research and wanting to keep digging and learning that I stumbled upon the Nelson S. Institute. Um, and that's when I started, knowing there was a book and then knowing that you could become actually a authorized practitioner. Um, so, I took the test and then off to the races. But knowing that I was already practicing infinite banking, but didn't even realize it because it wasn't called that when I started it. But now I have the confidence of knowing that this has been a long-standing strategy that even predates Nelson Nash in some respects. Like I understand the idea that Nelson codified it. He created a system that we can now follow and practice. But like the underpinnings of what Nelson, I think, taught had started before him. Because my understanding, and Jesse, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, people back in like the early 1900s, like I said, be predating even the Federal Reserve, this is where people would store their cash that they earned. Like this was the place, the depository that this is how it was done. and how things maybe got away from that for a long time, maybe just, the commercialization of the banking industry and the and all that helped out, how, this kind of like fell by the wayside for a long time. Um, so like I said before, I'm excited that like I'm still like every day I still learn something new about its applications that um that still fascinates me.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that I appreciate about having getting to know you is your continual pursuit of getting better and improving and learning more and applying yourself. That sticks out to me. No, I think you described it well, David, using the word codified. He did. I mean, he wrote a book. He wrote the original book on infinite banking. And I think that we could just use his own words to address that idea about whole life insurance. Nelson, in his book, said what he brought was systemization and scale. Yes, whole life insurance had been around. Yes, it has been popular for a long time. Yes, it's been able to be used in different ways and even more over time. But even in the beginning, original, plain Jane, simple whole life insurance, if it were bought and utilized with a plan, but what he did was he brought scale to that. He said, no, you could build a private family banking system, and here are these 5 principles of think long range and don't be afraid to capital. So he did what you said. He codified it, and then in his own words in the book, he says that he added scale to it. Whole life insurance has pre-existed, me and you and the IRS and everything else. So no, I think you did a good job of describing that. I had a follow up question there. Let's see if I can recall it. Oh, what was it? Oh, I wanted to know. So when you found out, because you said when you found out that there was this community and like minded people and the Nelson Nash Institute existed, did you just automatically then, when you even learned that, just say, well, I'm going to do that? That's the route that I'm going to take. That's something that I want to do. I want to be a part of that. I want to do that. I mean, what went in your mind when you found out about that?
But what went into my mind was that because we in the financial services industry, um, a lot of it becomes homogenized, meaning like we all speak and look at things somewhat similarly in sometimes in our industry, where it could start to feel and look somewhat cookie cutterish. Asset allocation, you put X amount, like if a young person puts 90% in equities and 10% in fixed income, and then you slowly change that mixture over time. And it was all about like having the money go to a money manager, and then you're earning a fee on from what the money manager is how they're managing the money. But I found that this was like this very special subset of financial professionals that are doing something that I consider to be very unique. And I found it unique because I found myself as maybe being the average financial services professional that's been doing this for a long time, and not knowing that this becoming your own banker and infinite banking concept was like a culture that unto its own. And I gravitate towards the uniqueness of it, because I like to think that I'm doing something that's, again, out of the box, out of the ordinary. This is perfect for me in that respect. Again, it married all of my experience before from Wall Street and everything that I got trained in there, and allowed me to bring that into this concept that has origins going back 100 years, and being able to marry the two. But then having a community of people like you, and having the masterminds, and going to coaching academy, and going to think tank, and knowing that there's like this subculture of professionals that are very passionate about exactly what infinite banking represents and what it can do to be freeing for people that get introduced to it, including myself.
Right. Well, in the box thinking and in the box financial philosophy keeps you in the box. So I as well appreciate the independence, the autonomy of thinking outside of the box and then doing outside of the box and then helping other people achieve, financial independence and freedom by thinking out of the box. There's a movie, The Matrix. I always think of infinite banking is that it's unplugging from the matrix. It is thinking out of the box. It's doing something completely different than what everybody else is doing because it's, again, in a codified way, in a systematized way, in a way that's scalable. You are on a trajectory of becoming your own banker. That's not conventional. That's not something that we pick up from work or Wall Street. It's about other things. It's about RORs, like you said. Yeah, okay, well, you're young. You need to start with taking lots of risk and putting lots of your money in the market and, a minority towards safer assets. And then as you get older, you flip that scale and you do the opposite. But banking and financing as a lifestyle is just not brought into the equation. So it's very out of the box. It's very unique, and I love and appreciate the community as well. So you went through the Nelson Nash Institute's practitioner program. You're a practitioner. I'm curious then, what about in your personal life? Anything that you'd like to share or be willing to share? What does it look like for you implementing infinite banking? Do you own and use policies in your personal life? Is there any way that you've used policies before that you would share or that you'd like people to know about, to maybe pique their curiosity about how then they could use infinite banking?
So so now I've needed to re-educate my own family and have them rethink their thinking about where we store our money. Because, I don't want to just talk the talk, I want to walk the walk. And I don't have um professional integrity if I am not actually what I would call eat my own cooking. Because what I'm doing is I'm showing people this is the way to do it. And if I'm not doing it myself, then I have no leg to stand on. Um, so what, so I've had to like I said before, retrain my own family's thinking about where they store their money. I now have most of my money stored in my cash value life insurance policy. And then when it comes time for needs of money to pay expenses, loans come out from my policy, go back into my bank. And then I do have a system for paying back so I don't steal the peas. Um, and now I know that because for a long time, Jesse, like I didn't have life insurance because I was so caught up in the whole Wall Street mentality. Like for instance, my father-in-law, may he rest in peace, because he had amassed some wealth for himself. He was always of the mindset, and I respected him a lot of he was a self-insured, meaning I'll worry about it if and when I need it. And I don't know if that could be unique to, but he had a lot of influence on how I didn't have life insurance for a long time. Um, and thinking about self-insurance, but then I realized the importance of being able to have money that's put aside that does protect my family, not just from what I'm earning and what's in the bank currently, but if God forbid something happens to me. Because I think as someone who's a lifelong endurance athlete, I always think I'm going to be living forever, which is a myth in and of itself. So again, I'm an active IBC, not only practitioner, but also a user. Um, and I'm slowly, like, especially with my daughters who are 29 and 25, you know, like it's been a slow process to have them understand the importance of having their money potentially flow in a different manner than they're traditionally used to.
Yeah, I've picked up on that one point of you being an endurance athlete. We need to talk more about that. That's awesome. I saw something that you'd posted the other day. I feel like about swimming. I love it. No, now I'm going to lose. Oh no, I had you. You made me have a thought. If you're open to attending a roundtable conversation, I don't know that that topic of being self-insured wouldn't be a good one for us to field together. It's one that I've addressed before. The one thing I'll say this, and then we'll move on from that topic, and maybe we'll field it in a fuller manner soon. If somebody was going the self-insured route, and let's say they paid off their home mortgage. I didn't come up with this. I heard somebody else, but it stuck with me. I really like how they described it. So imagine yourself as having your mortgage paid off. Does that mean that you're going to call the insurance company and cancel your home insurance policy because now you're self-insured? You don't even have that mortgage anymore. Well, no, I don't think that would cross most people's minds that, okay, well, I've paid off my mortgage, so I don't owe anything on that house anymore, so I don't even need to insure it now. That really struck me, that description, and I thought it very thought-provoking. Well, then catch me up to speed, David. Tell me anything that I haven't asked that you wish I had of, anything that you would like people to know. Is there anything, to catch us up to date to where you're at, both personally implementing infinite banking in your life, professionally helping other people? Of course, I'll get your contact information put down in the show notes on this video. But yeah, anything to catch us up to speed or that you wished I would have asked?
Um, what I'll say is that as I become more, what I call more seasoned in this industry, is that what's becoming more and more important for me to teach and educate others is this idea of uh, not only just like the way that we flow our money traditionally through financial institutions and how we could redirect that in a way where we are becoming our own banker, but how this, like what my practice is starting to gravitate towards, is this idea of um like the Rockefellers having a family constitution and having a codified system that families implement to have a set of rules and standards by which wealth is handled, how it's distributed, who gets what, when do they get it, what are the guidelines around that? Mentoring children early about like financial responsibility. Like I just happen to be lucky that like I had a teacher, and like thank you by the way for being a teacher, and my younger daughter by the way is a third grade teacher. That is such a undervalued profession that like I just look at my own life and you were a teacher, and what my daughter's going through now as being a third grade teacher, and the influence that she has on these young minds. So what I'm saying is that my thinking is as a practitioner and as a in the financial services industry is this idea of what does this mean from a legacy family, where life insurance is like the centerpiece of it all, where and you teach your children and your family financial stewardship. You want to have a set of values that hopefully get passed on to future generations. So to me, that's where my practice is starting to gravitate to, is becoming more involved in educating around like what trust structures could potentially look like. And you don't need to be an ultra wealthy person to have, a irrevocable life insurance trust and other types of strategies and mechanisms. That's where I see my role going forward in all the experiences I've gathered over time, is um, where family is first and foremost in the formation of any discussion, whether it be IBC, whether it be, what I do, when it comes to, uh, my advice I give when it comes to managing money, where there's a structure. that's something that I'm very passionate about now going forward is, you know, marrying my clients with this idea of the family constitution, having a set of values, having a core set of principles around what money means to you or your family, and having rules around it all. And life
I
insurance is definitely one of those pieces.
I cut you off a bit right there. By trying to say that I love it. I love those aspects of when you do begin thinking intergenerationally, family meetings, family retreats, family constitution, what's our family philosophy, what's our plan. I love all that stuff for sure. Some of my favorite client calls, and the longer I'm in the business, the longer my clients are also implementing the concept. Some of my favorite calls are the calls where I've got three generations on the Zoom call with me or whatever. And, I'm talking to the grandparents and the parents and then the babies, the youngest generation. And we can build out to, okay, well, you've started this family banking system. You've created some policies across these generations and you're controlling and profiting over the financing in your lives as a family. And then that does lead to other conversations around trust and other structures and systems to give you, a firmer foundation and, what I call and what I term your financial fortress. Long-term care annuities. I mean, there are other aspects. And I appreciate this. You said this maybe before we even hit record. You said you used the word holistic, having a holistic approach to working with our clients, to working with people, not just the one thing. So I can appreciate that. I love that. Well, then tell everybody what would be the best way for them to reach out to you or to connect with you, David.
I would initially, I'm building out some new websites, but my email, which is my last name, which is Hammer, the letter D is in David, and the number three at gmail.com. That would be the best initial way. And I don't know if you have people give their cell phone numbers on these trans.
If you want to, that's completely up to you. You can.
I could also be reached directly on my cell at area code 201 709 6158.
And I'll make sure to put all that in all that contact information in the show notes below for sure. Man, I've enjoyed the time, David. I think you've got a unique perspective. I do look forward to more conversations. I'd love to have you at a round table. I think we should put our schedules together if you'd be gracious enough to come back and sit in on some of these discussions, maybe including the one that I talked about, self-insured. I think, well, and then this last one that you're making me think of, all the other thinking and plans and structures around, this family constitution and these aspects, for the people that really want to implement something big here and really want to implement something long range. I'd love to have those types of conversations. If you don't have anything else, let me know if you do, but I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. Let's get into it. Well, we've already been talking books, so I could probably bypass that. That's a perennial question of mine. But is there either a hobby or an unknown talent that people might not know that you have? Hobby or talent?
Um, I am a multiple Ironman finisher. Um, I've been a three-time New York City Marathon finisher, and I've finished in my life. If I change my background, you could see the medals. Those are some of them. I think I've ran either 35 or 40 full marathons over the course of the last 30 years. So my pastime when I'm not doing this is out either swimming, biking, or running. So that I don't know if I would call it a special talent, but from what we do for a living, in my opinion, is that this is it's a sport that it requires endurance, especially when you're asking people to rethink their thinking. You need to have a lot of endurance to maintain that conversation and have the person on the other end maintain your energy level so that they can be at least open to the rethinking part. So I think there's a parallel there um, when it comes to endurance.
I can appreciate that. How about a favorite all time fictional book or movie?
Okay, so there's no question in my mind a required movie to watch in for to do what Jesse, what you and I do, and if there's professionals that are watching this, Glenn Ross is one of the greatest sales movies of all time. I don't know if you remember it, but Alec Baldwin has a soliloquy for 10 minutes at the beginning of that movie that is just life-changing. Um, so a lot of my fictional um, movies, as you can tell, they dovetail around like finance and Wall Street. So like the movie Wall Street with Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas is another great movie. When he says, greed, for a better use of the word, is good. Greed clarifies. Like this is it's like so this is like these are the kind of people, not like I mean obviously Michael Douglas took it to a level, but these are the kind of people that I kind of grew up with somewhat in my neighborhood, like investment bankers and people that were, movers and shakers like that. So I gravitated toward those kind of movies. Of course, some of the classics like The Godfather, um, um, Apocalypse Now, and then some more um, um, lighthearted movies would be like um, well, like anything with Adam Sandler in it.
Right?
Like Caddyshack is still cracks me up to this day, even 40 years later. But I love movies. That's another passion of mine.
Well, I'm gathering that I asked for one and I think I got like six or seven. But what was the name of the first one again? You said
Glengarry Glen Ross.
Glenn Ross.
Got it.
Kevin
That's new.
Spacey is like the sales manager. Al Pacino is one of the salespeople. Jack Lemmon, if I don't know if these actors, if you remember, these are guys that are, old time actors. Walter Matthau, no, not Walter Matthau, Alan Arkin, but just this is just like it's like it's like the whole scare tactic of having a sales manager and having like someone from the corporate office come and give these guys the business because they're not getting their numbers are they're not up to stuff, and like he's reading them the riot act, and it's just very impactful movie.
okay, okay, I love it. So I typically ask about a go-to healthy habit, but I think you already gave us some with the biking and the running and the swimming. So how about has there ever been a bad habit that you broke?
Um, I would say healthy eating, diet. My big misconception is that because I exercise so much and I burn so many calories that I could just almost eat whatever I want. And that's not true, especially as I get older and my metabolism slows down, is I have to be much more intentional with what I eat. Um,
I love that. How about what's the most impactful thing somebody's ever told you?
I would say, well, first of all, this is gonna talk about having work-life balance because I've had people that have passed away in my life, and as they've gotten older, you know, I never like what's been impactful is like you're never going to be on, God forbid, on your deathbed saying, I wished I had worked more or I'd been in the office longer, which means that for me, it's more, it's very important to incorporate family and personal with my work. So I like to travel while I work a lot. I like to get out while I'm working. Because what I love about what we do is we get to meet people and we get to hear their stories and we get to meet different ways of thinking, just like we're talking to them about like rethinking their thinking about their money and how they flow their money. I'm always learning from other people about like what's unique about what they do. So as I'm getting older into business, I like to travel more. I like to go to more events, get to meet people. So I don't know if that answers that question, but that's what came to my mind.
No, I'll take it. I'll take it. I appreciate that. All right. How about sunrise or sunset?
I used to be a sunset, but now I'm a sunrise.
I wondered about that because of the. Okay, go ahead.
I'll tell you why, because that like all of these like old sayings, like they seem like when we were younger, they were a little bit like on the campy side, like early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. But all these things have a basis in like actual logic and practicality. So as I've gotten older, you know, I even take it to a scientific level because I study there's someone named Andrew Huberman who is a neuroscientist and
Yeah,
he's a
Stanford.
professor at Stanford, and like he always talks about how you need to get, like it's been scientifically proven that you need to get sunlight first thing in the morning. And even when you think it's dark out and the sun isn't out, you're still getting rays of sun through the darkness. So when you wake up, go out in nature, look up in the sky. So that, like getting up first thing in the morning. Um, so long-winded answer is sunrise.
No, I love it. I love getting that background. I listened to a 4+ hour discussion the first time that I ever heard Andrew Huberman. He was on the Jocko podcast, and then I've listened to a good bit since then. It's terribly interesting, that stuff. And that's one of my morning habits is getting outside ASAP while I do some other morning routines, but I'm getting light in my eyes early. So no, that's neat for me to hear. I love it. How about picnic or restaurant?
It depends on the mood. I don't actually have a preference for one or the other. Probably more restaurant if you put a gun to my head.
Okay, beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Sword or hammer?
Um, Probably a hammer just from a namesake standpoint.
Right, you had to, right? Like I've asked other guys that as a rapid fire question here at the end, but I'm like, man, this is like a gimme for David. Very cool. And then, how about what characteristic do you value most in a person?
Um, I value that you keep to your word, so you do what you say you're going to do. If you make a promise, you make good on the promise, whether that be getting back to a client that has a question about and always being responsive. Um, so making good on your promises.
I love that. All right, and then the last question, I got this from my boys, David, sitting over the supper table one evening. They asked me, and I'll ask you, would you rather be able to breathe underwater or fly?
Well, I would have said flying until I have such a passion for swimming now that you alluded to, like you've seen some of my posts. So I wouldn't mind being able to swim underwater for days on end.
Right, right, exactly. I knew that was going to be maybe even a more interesting question than normal just because of, yeah, you're on the go so much, running, swimming, etc. This has been a blast for me. I'm going to have your contact information below in the show notes. I appreciate you being willing to come on here and have this conversation with me. I think that it's been terribly valuable for other people to be able to enjoy your origin story like I did the other day when we were talking on the phone. So, any last words? I'll leave it to you.
No, I appreciate you having me on and letting me tell my story. Um, Sometimes I think we don't realize that even in some of these simple answers to certain questions that people, maybe your audience, maybe there's more commonality and maybe they learn something from some of my simple answers that maybe unlock something for them.
Yep, I believe so, and I appreciate that. Fantastic. Well, that was an absolute blast for me to have David on. His contact information will be in the show notes below where you can reach him there. My hope is that you do live and leave a lasting legacy. To reach me, you can find me at durhamtalents.com.